Hey, you are listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm one of your co-hosts and multiple faces of the show, Mark.
And I'm one of your other co-hosts, Billy.
You sound so disappointed by that, Mark. I am the other guy, Josh, and we are joined by Adam Jack. He is the writer, star, and director behind the Horrific Hope selection, The Lurker, which is going to be playing during our Image Issues block. Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So can you kind of give us in a nutshell what audiences are going to expect jumping into The Lurker?
Well, it is not your average horror movie. It's incredibly talky for a horror movie, but it's still entertaining. Don't worry about that. The general premise is a serial killer who targets online influencers, mid-level ones, who he thinks are dishonest. He chains them to their bed, forces them to go through their phones in front of each other, basically gives them trivia, and wrong answers are met with torture, essentially, both physical and mental. So not a great log line, but
when you came up with the idea, did you accidentally or intentionally come up with a movie that you end up cheering for the bad guys?
See, that's no, that's not. It's partially on purpose, and that depends on the person. I have found it's very divisive with people.
Interesting.
But no, the original draft of the film, The Lurker, was more Jokery / Jigsaw-y, and I friggin' hated it. He was just such a villain that I disliked him. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, nobody's a villain. You know, nobody sets out and goes, oh, I'm the bad guy. And when I started thinking of it, like, he goes in there and he thinks he's Batman. He thinks he's the Punisher. Then everything flipped. I'm like, so when I write it that he thinks he's the hero, it changed everything for the film. So yeah, the third or fourth draft sort of ended up being what it is now.
Yeah, because he makes the comment in one of the scenes that they did some polling and testing, and in China, everybody wanted to be like scientists and all this stuff. And in America, they want to be social influencers and things.
Yeah,
it was like
that's stolen right out of the internet. There was actually one of those TikTok things going around talking about that. And it was like with all the videos. And I was like, it just affected me when I heard that. I'm like, it's so true. I mean, you meet kids today and they just want to be, on TikTok, and they're not, they don't care about anything else. And it did. I mean, to some extent, that bothers me. So I guess that kind of grew from there.
No.
So I'm guessing you've seen some of the things talking about, like, some of the countries like China. You open up TikTok and it shows kids doing like math and science and all this stuff, and you open 100%. It up here and it's nothing but dances.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the whole idea for the movie came from, was stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's his sort of motivation sprung from there. Really, where it's the root of the movie came from my past marriage. So it came to a point where I remember I've been doing things on my phone, and there's one point where she grabbed my phone out of my hand to do something with it. And I remember the sheer terror I felt as she was going through my phone. Was she going to see things? What was going to happen? And that fear, I was like, that's a real new fear of having someone go through your privacy like that. And I was like, what would it be like if someone forced you to be honest and like stripped you bare in front of people and made you bear that virtual soul that we all, I mean, to some extent, everyone lives two lives now. You've got your online life and your real life. Everyone has a version of that. And I'm like, well, what would happen then? And so I kind of wanted to play on that fear more than anything, and then did some research, and, things grew from there. So
I don't know if it's because I recently rewatched the Batman, but a lot of the motivations for the Lurker feel very Dano Riddler.
I hadn't seen it, and I wrote it, and I was in the middle of shooting it when it came out, and I sat back and went, son of a bitch. Oh my God, it pissed me off so much, because I had a whole marketing plan where I was going to have the Lurker do online rants like via live streaming before it came out, but it would have just been Paul Dano's Riddler, and I was like, throw that out because like, ugh. But yeah, no,
Sorry
it's
to bring up such a sore subject.
Yeah, no, it really, I was so pissed. It was one of those situations where like it was too late to change it. Like we were literally filming a year ago, like on weekends now. And so like I had taken a day off to go watch this movie, and I was just like, come on, man. Like, ugh. Anyway.
Well, I think with this movie, the thing that really fascinated me into programming it as part of Horrific Hope is how multifaceted this is because, from all three of us, to as minuscule skill as it might be, this podcast, we are content creators. And so there's a layer of ourselves, like you said, that we're putting out here into the world. And then there's this layer that, you have one-on-one with friends.
Yeah.
And this movie hits on a multitude of... Okay. This movie hits on a multitude of social commentaries from how we idolize influencers. There's body dysmorphia in certain portions. There is our obsession with true crime. I mean, this just kind of feels like a social commentary on how we intake the internet and how unhealthy it is. Can you kind of talk about just really creating something that felt multi-textual?
Yeah. Well, what it is really getting into the characters, and that's what it came from. Is I wanted to make sure that everyone, again, with that duality, to give it the multi-layer, everyone from the bad guys to the good guys has good and bad, and I really wanted to make sure that kind of came through. And also, even things like the body dysmorphia, it's about truth, I guess, is what it comes down to. It's about the different versions of everyone's truth. And so that's sort of how the multi-levels come in, is that you're just, as long as you have kind of both versions and then the truth in the middle coming from every single character, it happens naturally. It grows that way, I guess. So that was a very long but not specific answer. I apologize for that. But for example, at the beginning of the movie, it says based on true events. Obviously, there's no influencer killer. Obviously, that amount of the story is not based on true events. But that's where that nod at the beginning to Hamlet comes in. That's not just me being pretentious. So what happened is that the subplot, the sexual abuse subplot, is based on a true story. Okay? So someone who I care about was essentially, they were raped by their best friend's husband in a very similar situation to that. And so it was something that it's just stuck with me forever. And I know that person, he would not think of himself as a bad guy. He would not view that as what he did. And so when I wrote this story, it was sort of that play in Hamlet. It was that if you watch this yourself and that comes out, do you recognize it, sort of thing. And that's what that nod to Hamlet was all about and whatnot in the beginning. So.
That's the great thing about the horror genre, I find, is that it challenges the audience to kind of take a look inside themselves, whereas you have other genres that don't really do that. And if you can throw in some fun gags and some comedic moments kind of sprinkled in there, I think it works really well. With this film in particular, like I really I love the dynamic between blanking on the brother's name.
He is, wow, so am I. Colin and Marcus. Sorry, it's been a minute.
Marcus is dang, I'm bad with names. That's pretty bad when you wrote the movie and can't remember the character.
Marcus was probably one of my favorite characters in this movie. He's kind of the typical scumbag, but he brings this like layer of like comedic talent to it that I thought was really, really well done. And it kind of surprises you where his arc kind of takes over. Yeah. And also how like the couple of influencers that we do follow, how they also end up connecting to Alice and Sean from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. That's Jared played Marcus. I was having a really hard time casting Marcus, an incredibly hard time, actually. Everyone who was sending in tapes, everyone was doing like an Andrew Tate, like macho dick thing. And I was like, you're telegraphing that he is the asshole. You're telegraphing I'm the bad guy. And I couldn't figure out how to get around it. And then it clicked because Jared is an old friend. I mean, I've known Jared most of my life. I did a TV show pilot when I was in my early 20s, and he was like the main character in it. He's just such a funny, friendly guy, and he'd been helping me out kind of behind the scenes on things. He actually there was at one point we were trying to raise money with Lurker NFTs, and he was like wearing a mask for that. And it just clicked. I'm like, Jared is such a lovable guy that he can't play bad. I'm like, so what if I cast him here? Like, how do we balance that? How it happens? And it really worked. It was difficult sometimes because he is comedic. Like that's what he's best at. And so there were times where it was coming off a little bit sitcom. You have to go, come on, Jared, bring it down. But like when we got it, it really worked. So yeah.
No,
I got a
ahead.
lot of questions at the beginning. So
well, I mean, I'll be honest. The Lurker, I started calling him Mirror Face the whole time just because of the mask. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, see, that was also tricky because even in the script, there is a very long description of the mask. Because originally I was planning on doing this for a bigger budget, and I imagined we'd have a prop person. And my biggest fear, I'm like, he cannot look like a disco ball. I'm like, it's like pieces of glue glued on in such a fashion that's a macabre piece of art, not a disco ball. Finally, I had to make my own. I did it myself. And there was two versions actually. There's a original version, which I used real mirror on, and when I was done, it looked wicked, but it weighed a goddamn ton. Like it was so heavy on your head. But also, it was based on just like a paintball kind of mask. But the movie Hunt Her, Kill Her came out just before we were about to shoot, and they all had that mask without the mirror on it. And it just became, I saw the trailer, I was like, well, that's going to be, if that becomes something, that's going to be iconic to them, and mine just looks like the mirror version. So I did a new one with synthetic mirror, like the kind of that you like stick up in a locker or something like that, which is the one you see in the movie. But also with Thane, his eyes were so expressive. I was like, the other one, like you had no eyes. So I was like, if you lose that, you lose so much personality. So it worked better anyway.
I was going to say, with that mask that you used, turned out very good.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, my fiance thought it was insane because I spent like 6 weeks. I'm in the basement just over gluing things on. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's gonna be great." Yeah,
it's like just wait.
It kind of also it's like feels like an extension of his motivation to kind of put a mirror up to the influencers and the reality. Yeah. Which is like, I love how this film explores mental health specifically because everyone, like you said at the beginning with you and Mark, everyone in America wants to be an influencer. And then once you reach that status of influencer, then you have like this entire like 360, 365, like you always have to be on. Like Robin Williams kind of talked about in articles, interviews about like how people always expected him to be on and how it like really hindered his mental health as a result.
Oh, absolutely. And you see all these stories coming out. There's the one influencer like who murdered his girlfriend, and then there's that woman who was like doing parenting stuff, and it turns out she's abusing all of her children and stuff. Like it's just somewhere, I want to say Utah, whatever, but it was a mother, and the kid like escaped from the house and went to the neighbors and was like, I'm hungry. And then it turns out like she's actually like not feeding them and stuff and like keeping them in like locked in their bedrooms and all kinds of crazy shit. So yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys can catch tickets are now on sale for Horrific Hope. We're going to be back on the other side. Like I said at the beginning, The Lurker plays during our Image issues block, which starts at 11:30 a.m. on April 6th and plays with the world premiere of The Feast, Alone, and the Virginia premiere of Yokes, as well as the Virginia premiere of Perfect. Tickets are now on sale right now. You guys can click the link in the description below. But when we get back, we're going to be jumping back into our series on the Omen. We'll be right back. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm,
or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Welcome back. We are back to talk about the bane of my existence, like I talked about in 2 weeks ago.
You don't like the Omen?
I don't like the second Omen. For some reason, I just don't like movies that are centered around military schools, because I also don't like Child's Play 3.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about this movie, but yes.
I hated it.
Did you never see Taps back in the 80s?
No. Is it a horror movie?
I've heard. No, that's the one with is Tom Cruise and what's his the chicken guy from Breaking Bad. He's like one of his first movies, I think.
It's got a handful of younger future famous people in it.
Yeah.
You're not selling me on this, Mark.
No.
I don't know specifically what it is about the military school model and horror that just doesn't vibe with me. But this movie is just, God. What does everyone else think about this movie?
Well, I hated it. I hated it a lot. Well, in all fairness, I don't like the Omen either. I don't like the remake. I don't like the original. I think they're okay, but I don't like them. This one, though, I particularly just hate. And I've done a lot of thinking about this, because when you guys first told me I was going to be talking about this, it was a few weeks ago. So I watched it, and I was like, I hate it, knee-jerk reaction. Then I watched it again in case I'm just being biased, and I'm like, no, I still hate it. And so here's my thoughts on it. I've got to say out front, I am biased. So as an atheist, I don't like religious horror. It just most of the time doesn't do it for me, but in some cases it does work. I like Rosemary's Baby, right? Mm-hmm. I don't hate The Exorcist, but these ones I really strongly dislike. And I think the issue is lazy filmmaking, in the sense that there's not enough world building when it's religious horror. With movies like Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist, there's a certain level of I don't believe it, and they take time to warm us into it. Like in a vampire movie, very rarely is it just, oh, there's vampires and everyone accepts it, right? But in this movie, it's just he's the son of the devil. That's how it is. The devil's real. God is real. Therefore, this is scary. Accept it. So there's not enough world building for me to go, oh, and kind of get into the story. Whereas the other ones, like I said, The Exorcist, for example, there's a lot of time building up where the mother doesn't believe that this could possibly happen. There's a lot of science involved before they finally lay down, okay, this must be something otherworldly. This must be the devil. And even in the Omen 2, I mean, a lot of them are skeptical about the fact that Damien is the Antichrist, but not that there could be an Antichrist. That's just given. That's just obvious. But when could he be no, he couldn't be. But so to me, if they took more time to build it, to me, a more interesting story would be about the little boy where people are trying to say he is, and he's struggle with the the story of like that can't be a thing. I can't be that. That's not real. And him like coming to terms with it over a whole movie to me, or like Hereditary or whatever. That something like that to me more interesting than this movie. But that's my rant. Sorry.
I don't know the last time we've had a guest come on and be like, I fucking hate it.
That might be Legend with Zambies last year.
No, that was you.
No,
You
she
came
hated
on
it
and
too.
said you hated it.
She hated it too. But yeah, no, that's I want to build off of what Adam was just saying, because that's fascinating to me to like really consider. It's something that in terms of like world building I've never considered about religious horror. And like you said, like The Exorcist is a great example where it kind of like eases you in and kind of like introduces these ideas, and it's almost kind of left as like this like last resort. Whereas here, especially in the sequel, it is like kind of almost this like best kept secret. Anybody that like gets close to Damien, or like close to the quote unquote secret that he is the Antichrist, they're like, they meet their end, and it's just kind of like, why this?
Yeah, and who gives a shit? Like,
choice.
who cares about these people die? It's like, introduce the character. I think he's the Antichrist, and you're dead. Like, it's just, whoop, I'm throwing shit around here. Yeah, it's just so fast, and you know, I don't care about any of the people that die. Like, and even the deaths are kind of cool. Like the dude getting chopped in half in the elevator had like early Final Destination vibes to it, but like,
yeah,
I don't care about him. He's just some doctor. Who gives a shit? Like, you know, I don't know. Sorry.
I mean, the elevator death was kind of cool.
Yeah, like it's fun, but like not scary. Oh, I'm screaming so loud it's telling me to be quiet.
I agree with Adam though. How the story went from, what was it, the sergeant or whatever, telling him, "Hey, look, you're the Antichrist," and everything. He goes up to the bathroom, looks for the symbol in his head, screams, and then 2 minutes later, he's telling everybody what to do, how to do it, and he's acting like the Antichrist.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't even have that little. It had what, a minute or two. Versus like a time.
Whose story is it? Whose story is it? It's bouncing around from character to character. Like,
I hate the juxtaposition of that scene where he's like reading the Bible and he's like learning about the Antichrist, and then he like next thing he knows he's like out on like the pier and he's just like, why me?
Oh, and it's not the obvious call to like the Garden of the Seven. Like, take this chalice from my lips, Lord. Like, it's just like so on the nose. Not to mention the directing too. Like, when did that movie come out? It was like the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Was it?
Was it like
78?
Okay, 70. I was gonna say, it feels
78.
so old fashioned. Like the way the camera moves, and like everyone talks with that like fake, almost British rich person accent that everyone had for some reason in New York in 70s movies. It's like not real. And it felt like a stage play. It felt like everyone would walk in and like, I hit this mark, I say my lines, I blah blah blah, and move on. There was nothing real about it at all. So, you know.
And the other thing that got me was how it was using crows. It seems like a lot of the movies at the time were trying to use birds and crows and everything else. I'm like, of course you're going to just throw that in there to fit what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I felt like a movie made by producers. Like, you know, no one gave a shit about the movie. It was just about money, which I hate. So I don't hate money.
The original, like I said when we did Invasion of the Body Snatchers last week, that the original Omen and Body Snatchers and a couple others from that time period, for me they worked because the atmosphere of them fit the time period and what was going on.
100% with the McCarthyism and everything going on at the time. But the most brilliant thing about the Body Snatchers is that no matter what side you're on, you view it as the other side taking over. So it it works for everyone, and that's what's sort of brilliant about the Body Snatchers. You know?
So the original Omen, I like. This one was kind of hit or miss. Some scenes were cool, some were like, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not the best in the series, but we haven't finished watching them all yet.
Yeah, we still have quite a while to go.
Well, the next one I think has Sam Neill playing Damien.
Yeah.
Yes. Final Contact.
To be honest, I was almost tempted to watch it when I was like scrolling through Disney Plus and I saw he was in the next one. I was like, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be disappointed. So I did.
He does have an underrated horror career though.
He does. I love In the Mouth of Madness and Event Horizon and stuff like that.
Yep.
Well,
so, but what's his name? Lance Hendrickson.
Lance Hendrickson. Yes. God bless that man. And just kind of shows up in like random horror sequels. He's done everything from Leprechaun, Damien, Hellraiser. I mean, he's just kind of done it all.
Yeah.
And that's what he's known for, is playing these little roles like that. Bishop and Aliens and Alien 3 and yeah, that's what I know him from primarily. But then you see him in things like being the kind of mentor for Damien, and they never explain why the cult. Everybody knows that Damien is the Antichrist.
Yeah, how did that come out? There's no internet, right? Did they just fax pictures around? Like, what the hell? It doesn't make any sense.
I think the one that really bothers me most about like the potential of this movie is the opening scene. So the opening scene is set literally a week after the events of the first film, and you have two characters, Michael and Carl, that are Michael's is trying to be convinced by Carl that Damien is the Antichrist. Like, they talk about the fact that there would be like four. Carl recognizes him in the newspaper, and I don't know. I'm really like, I think that scene in particular is probably the most fascinating thing about this movie in and of itself, because I really would have loved an expansion on it, but also I am also a Christian. So like for me, I am fascinated on Adam, as you were talking about, how people specifically view religious horror, for one, for two, how the world like would actually react if the Antichrist came to be. Like, I believe the Antichrist.
It's a very simple answer. They put on mega hats and go to his rallies. Like, I mean, realistically, that's the exact model of what everyone said was going to happen. Someone who they follow blindly into whatever he said to change America into the dictatorship and blah 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 blah. I mean, watch the news; it's happening.
Which is fascinating to go off of that point, because there have been several like scholars that have actually like written like theories on like how, because the Bible talks about how like no one knows the day or time where it's going to come. And many people believe that there have been like assumed quote unquote antichrists over where you talk about like Hitler and Stalin. There was an online cult following of like Obama being one, Trump being one, like, you know.
And anyone where there's a mass following, people are going to start pointing that way. And also to be clear, also, I'm not, as much as I'm an atheist, I also am very fascinated by religious texts. I've read most of them, from the Bible to the Quran to the Book of Mormon. I find the stories within them incredibly interesting and fascinating. And that's what makes me upset with most religious horrors, when they get lazy with not using what's there. Yeah. There is a very rich background that can be drawn from, that you can do interesting things from, that are terrifying, but don't just go, you know, it's real, so believe it. That's just where my beef comes in, you know, like, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this one just kind of feels like a lazy kind of cash grab, where they were like, we're gonna pick out 2 Bible verses, have him read it in the movie, and then we're just gonna approach the deaths like slashers.
Exactly. It's disrespectful to me in that. I know it's coming from atheists. You're disrespecting the Bible, but it is. It's like, there is real text to base your film on. Use it. You know, if you can make me get into it as an atheist, then you're really doing something. If I start going, oh, this is interesting, this is scary, you know, I'm not going to dismiss it just because it's Christian. So, like, if you can build a world, I think that's interesting. So yeah, like that I'd be on board for. I think that's what, again, why I like Rosemary's Baby, is even by the end, when it's revealed that it is, you know, the Antichrist, I'm on board at that point. You know, I'm with you on the story. Yeah. So
I feel like you'd be one that would enjoy the original Prophecy with Christopher Walken.
I haven't seen it, but I think I would as well, from what I've understand of it. Yeah.
And I think that's one we should cover in the future.
Okay.
Because it's awesome. I think it's a very it's one of those movies that the people that know about it for a reason, and the ones that don't is because it's flown under the radar for everybody. And it falls into that religious horror with Christopher Walken being Gabriel, and it's a battle of angels on Earth and all kinds of stuff like that. So I feel like that would be more up your alley than this was. But this one was just kind of a weak sequel, almost like a sequel to put out a sequel.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It was just thrown together.
Yeah. Well,
that's how it feels.
This one is not as bad as The Heretic. Let's just make that clear. The Exorcist 2 is one of the worst.
Oh yeah, she's freaking tap dancing and like having. I saw that as like a child that was laughing out loud. Like, yeah, that's insane. And then Exorcist 3 is underrated, but
God,
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh my God,
not bad.
It's so good. Brad Dourif is in it.
Yeah,
it's great sequel.
It's got some good scares. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
I was gonna say I feel like another reason that this thing misses the mark is that I feel like it jumps into Damien owning the Antichrist title way too early as well.
Yes.
Which is what I said.
Yeah, no, that's it. You're right on the money. Like even Christ didn't want it, and that was like, you're the son of God. This is a good thing, and he's like, no, thank you. But this situation, he's just like, oh, that sounds all right. I'll just kill my cousin then. Like I don't know.
No.
And what the hell is that accent again? Like, what is it?
Hold on. It was Mark. Mark, join me. Mark, don't turn your back. Well, Mark, be that way, I'll just kill you.
Yeah. Like,
I had to, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No. And I think they just needed to pick a character too. Like, if it was about Damien, make it about Damien. Let's follow his story and let's get into him. Let's do a character study of the Antichrist. That's interesting.
They spent a lot of time jumping around between characters and trying to bring multiple storylines together.
Yeah. Like I think one of the things that like really bothers me is that we get to like meet the extended Thorne family in this one, but we're not actually given a reason to like latch onto them. It almost kind of feels like a lot of like the political subtext that were in the Star Wars prequels, where you're like, I'm not sure why I should care about this.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what it felt like, and there's just, it's nothing to latch onto in this film, because like, going back to like Damien kind of just like finding out and then, struggling for like a millisecond and then coming back. Like this film could have been a character study of him coming to terms with his like destiny and like his identity as the Antichrist. And this could have been a beautiful, like detailed, like mental health exploration character study. And then, you jump into the Sam Neill one and it's like, oh, he's accepted who he is. But no, they're like, you have that awkward transition of why me, and then F it. I'm just going to go ahead and accept it.
I couldn't agree more. I think you're right with military school too. It's too rigid and boring. Like let's meet a Damien that's in high school, that's got his own hopes and dreams. He's got a vision for his future. He's got plans. Maybe he's got a girlfriend. And all of a sudden this is thrown in the mix and he's got to come to terms with this. Like, that's not the life I want, and that would be interesting. I'd watch the shit out of that, but
and I'm going back to like how his followers are following him or how they find him. One of my questions was the step-on. So she married the husband just so she'd be there for Damien.
Yeah, right. That comes out of nowhere at the end.
Wait a minute. How long before did she have to marry him before? Yeah. How long has she known? And then when they're laying on the couch and all, it kind of threw me off anyway that she was sitting with Damien and the son's upstairs in the projector room and the husband's on the other side of the room. I'm like, wait, hold on. What in the world?
Yeah, no, it's right. And like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it can be done well with like, look at the Stand, or even the characters who go to Flag, the bad guys. They're not immediate like, I'm bad, I follow you. Like, it's like, I don't know, it's caricature and it's sloppy and dumb and boring.
So I feel like you didn't like the movie.
Wait, that's not what I'm getting from
Look.
it. You really, really like the movie, Mark. Can't you tell?
No.
Where do you guys stand on the sequels? Because Adam and I have made it very clear. Did you like this, or did you kind of hate it, or are you kind of in the middle with it?
It was kind of It's okay.
It was and at the same time like predictable and boring to me. But that just honest. I mean, it was predictable. A lot of the things, like at the beginning, one of the things you mentioned was them down in the tomb looking at the wall and everything else, and the rocks fall, and they're like, "Oh, let's run to that." And then all of a sudden, the rocks fall behind them. Like, "Oh, we're done."
Yeah.
I mean,
how would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Actually, I was kind of digging it up until that point, and I was like, "This just feels like an amusement park ride now." Like, I feel like this is like on Universal Studios. Like, it's so fake, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the other scenes, like going back to the subject of legacy, that this movie misses is that like Damien never really has a moment to like find himself, which is like crucial for like both like brain development, but also like at the same time like who you are as an individual. And he has this like scene between him and Paul where he's like it's either him and Paul or him and Richard, I can't remember, but they're basically, he like confides in him, and he's like, "Hey, like you know, what do you do exactly for Thorn Industries?" And he's like, kind of gives this like really wishy-washy answer, and he's like, "You should know it's gonna be yours someday." And it's like, well, what happens if, you know, he doesn't want to take that over? Like, that's not a legacy or you know, something that you should throw on a kid at 12 years old. Like, I had that happen when my parents had their own business growing up, and my dad always talked about, you know, giving it to my sister and I. And I was like, I have no interest in this. Like, so why would I want to do this? And scenes like that kind of always remind me of that. And I'm glad that I've ended up at where I have been. But yeah, like, let kids decide their own fate.
Wasn't Mark still alive at that point?
Yes, it's like within the first
why would
act.
it go to right? And then I'm thinking, well, why would it go to Damien and not Mark, since his dad's the one that's over it right now?
Yeah.
Well, he said he goes and he actually says, like Damien says, and Mark, and then he like the thought, like his uncle was like, yes, and Mark,
and
the fake British accent.
That's what I was
like, what is it? And
yeah, I think that my biggest issue is there's not really a character to like in the movie. Like, most movies have a character that you end up liking for one reason or another, but there was just nobody to really like in the movie. They were all kind of, and how did nobody ever slip up and say something to the uncle that, hey, we're a fucking cult?
Well, it's also unclear, are they a cult, or are they just people who are all of a sudden overcome by his presence and are just like, I'm with you, Damien? Like, it's very unclear about what goes on with that.
Well, if you go back to the first movie, it started before he was even born. They were watching
there's
the
people
signs waiting on him.
This is for you, Damien. This is all for you.
But even that seems weird. Like, is that, like I said, it feels more like a something like being taken over by I guess not the evil spirit, not the Holy Spirit or something like that. Like, it's just, they seem, I don't know.
Like, I wish this, like, I hate it when like films like force feed you like answers and stuff like that instead of like but we're 2 movies into this series right now, and like it's never quite clear except for the beginning of this movie how people know that he's the Antichrist. Like that's something I would like to see explored, like how he is able to influence, because like essentially the scene with like the bully where like the bully like you have a close up on his eyes, and then he's just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna start punching myself and running into this door."
Yeah, like throwing myself across the room.
Explain, just a little bit of like explanation as to like why these things take place, because they just seem like random events, and they're just like they're just explaining it away as like the devil did it.
And how did he learn that he could do the power at that quick? He hadn't even been told yet or anything else.
Yeah. Well, no, because he's the babe with the power.
Yeah.
The power?
What power?
What power?
This movie is not grand enough to be like as ambiguous as a series of like Phantasm, where like weird things happen and then like it eventually adds up, but weird things happen, but there's no engagement with the audience. There's no reason to latch on to these characters.
Yeah.
Like Mark was saying.
There's no mystery in this one. In Phantasm, we're not sure what's going on, and that kind of drives the whole series of there's new weird things and the balls and the weird midgety things. I can't say midget anymore. This little people things that run through or whatever. Whereas this is just like, again, it's the devil did it. Is just like the go-to answer for everything. It's like, oh, it's okay because the devil did it. You know, the devil works in mysterious ways, so just accept it, you know? And that's the problem. If he was even less for sure, it was like there's an evil force and we don't know, and I don't know, you could make it more mysterious, but you know.
Have y'all seen the third one with Sam Neill?
No. The trailer for the new one looks like interesting, at least. The first Omen. Or whatever
it's supposed to be a prequel.
Yeah, which is I guess we see
what happens.
We see the Jackal Mother, I guess, in that one. Maybe some things are explained. Maybe everything. Maybe this is the new one's gonna make them all awesome after you see it.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Oh, I get what you're going for now. You know?
But one of the things that I think is really interesting about this and like why it misses the mark, as we've been saying, is there is a quote from Charles Baudelaire, I think it's Baudelaire, or I don't know how you say his last name, but he says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. And so by having a cult based around him, and also like by having a cult, it's like having all of these like things happen and him kind of coming into it. I think it's also fascinating that this movie is like right on the cusp of like a few years of like the satanic panic that like just enthralled the 80s.
Oh, yeah. The Westminster history and everything. Yeah. Yeah, no. That's more interesting. Again, like the idea, it's so true that if this was a real thing, it wouldn't be so in your face about it. It would be quiet. It would grow slowly like cancer, you know? And that's, I don't know, that's a more interesting story. I feel like there's a movie there. I feel like there is a movie about an Antichrist that's a much better movie. You know?
Man, like, all right, so let me pitch you guys this movie. This is my Omen sequel that I would do.
Everyone the Omen dies.
So there are articles of I think it's in like Canada and like some parts of the US that from like the 80s where like kindergarten teachers were like arrested for in the height of the satanic panic. So what happens if you take that event, mix it in with the Omen? Damien happens to be the age of a kindergartner and happens to be in one of those classes. Like that would be an incredible story to explore.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about a kid who was told at like a very young age that he was going to be the Antichrist and was like abused in weird circles and things like that, but then was rescued from it? But as he's hitting puberty and stuff like memories are coming back and you're seeing people, places, and things, and it's that paranoia of, you know, how much of this is true. And that's fun. That's interesting. And again, when you keep the audience in that state of is it or isn't it, happening, that's more interesting to me. Again, it's like Rosemary's Baby, but with like a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this movie would be a really fun like film commentary to do as podcasters.
Right.
Just talking about all the movie mistakes we make.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. There was a movie in the late 90s, early 2000, and I think it had Winona Ryder, but I may be wrong, where a guy was learning, he was grown up and learning that he was the Antichrist and stuff as an adult. And I think it was a better Antichrist movie than this.
Lost Souls.
Was it Lost Souls?
Was it? Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Lost Souls, 2000. A Catholic school teacher meets an atheist journalist whom a group of Catholics and priests believe has been chosen by the devil to be the Antichrist.
See, that sounds interesting. Let's look this up.
Yeah, I saw it in the theater. That's why I remembered it.
Yeah.
John Hurt.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I worked at Blockbuster in and around that time, so I've probably like watched it when I got all my 10 free movies a week. Best part of working with Blockbuster.
I worked at Hollywood Video, so I guess.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was joking. My manager hired me because I liked movies, and he would just send me on the floor, and we would just talk about movies, like my whole shift. It was amazing. Yeah, we'd just be on the floor, blah blah blah, talking Friday the 13th, and somebody would come up. I'd be like, I don't know, over there. Don't rent Stealth over there. I got fired because of Stealth. I hated it so much. I put a sign up that said this movie is garbage, don't rent it, and like I put it in front of it, and like the regional manager came in, and I got shit canned because of that, which I totally deserved. But like, whatever, it was a bad movie. I stand by my decision there.
Somebody had to say it. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I went full Randall on that one.
All right, gents. Well, I think this is going to do it for us on Damien, the Omen 2. Adam, where can people find you online?
You can on Instagram. You can find me at adam-jack, and at the-lurkermovie.com. You can find that, or if you want to check out what's coming up with my latest movie, you can go to teenagegraverobber.com.
Ooh, sounds interesting. And you guys could also check out The Lurker playing at Horrific Hope Film Festival April 6th at 11:30. We are going to be playing that with the short films Alone, the world premiere of Feast, and the Virginia premieres of both Yolks and Perfect. Links are in the description right now to pick up tickets. We've got a great number of other selections out this year as well. Billy, my man, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Facebook at WTaber3.
He's like, I just post memes and stuff.
Yeah, pretty much now.
Hey, he posts things. So
yeah, he's doing better than me. I don't do much right now online.
Where can people find you at, Mark?
They can find kind of a stagnant Instagram account of painting miniatures at Titanium Juggernaut Painting. I'll post something again one day. Let me finish some projects, dang it.
One day.
We
just need to get you a social media manager, and I think you'll be okay.
Yeah. We'll
you guys
find
can
it next time.
You guys can find me. I'm at Captain Nostalgia on Letterboxd, but you guys can also find more information about our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcast from, along with Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast. So until next time, remember, the longer you stare into the abyss, the more the abyss stares back into you.